We are back, and I'm about to tell you about the time I hung out with Val Kilmer, the good and the bad. But first, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. It's ad-free. Let's get into it. So I'm working on a movie called Bloodworth. It was released in 2010 by Sony, and I was an office production assistant. I've been in the business 25 years. I've worked in multiple different departments. This was just one of those movies. And we shot it in 2009, and it had an all-star cast. Val Kilmer, Chris Christopherson, Dwight Yoakam, Hilary Duff, Reese Thompson, Hilary Burton, W. Earl Brown he adapted the screenplay, made the script. It was based off a book called Provinces of Night. It was directed by Shane Taylor, and it was an overall great experience. So my boss says to me one day, hey, Val Kilmer's just got here. His assistant is with him. Will you take them out grocery shopping and running errands? And I was like, okay. This is the first time I'd ever been asked to do something like this on a film. We were in a small town, and David Atherton was given a rental car. David Atherton was Val Kilmer's assistant at the time. And David Atherton, which I found out over the course of the film, was the makeup artist on Tombstone. And they became fast friends, and now David Atherton was part of his production company. So David Atherton's in the back seat, Val Kilmer's sitting right next to me, and we pull off on an adventure. So we head on out, and the first place he wants to go is a health food store. So at this time, we don't have a Whole Foods in our town. We had two little health food stores. So I take him to this one called Lovey's. And we're driving, and the speed limit throughout the entire town, because it's a small town, you can cross it in 15 minutes, is 35 miles an hour, and then there's some 45 mile an hour zones. So I'm driving 45 in a 45 mile an hour zone, and I'm kind of white knuckling it because I've got Val Kilmer sitting right next to me. And at this time, I playfully refer to him when I tell these stories as Fat Val Kilmer, because he had gone through this stage where he had gotten a little chubby. And he was doing movies where he would wear overcoats and stick his hands in his pockets and kind of push it out. And anytime they did a medium type shot, so he would hide his stomach. And it worked great for years because he did it a lot in his movies. But I would refer to him as, like, when I tell these stories, as Fat Val Kilmer. So I'm riding with Val, and he's right next to me. And like I said, I'm white knuckling it. I'm a little nervous because, it's Val Kilmer. And, he just turns to me in the most Val Kilmer kind of way. And he looks at me and he goes, you're driving very slow. And I said, well, I haven't had a ticket in 10 years. And, I'm doing the speed limit. I've got your safety in my hands because, I'm like in panic mode because I'm like, he's asking me to speed or something. I couldn't figure it out. And he says, I haven't had a ticket in 10 years either. And he leans into me and he goes, but it's because of this. And he held the S, and he's doing this with his hand. And I was like, okay. And then he goes on to tell me this story in New Mexico about driving 97 miles an hour, getting pulled by a cop. And then he just signed an autograph instead of a ticket because of this. And I'm like, okay, all right, well, that's fine. I said, I'll try to get us there a little quicker. I said, but I gotta obey the laws. I don't have this, I don't have that. So I'm like, okay, this guy's a weird cat, and I'm just now figuring this out. And I'd been a fan of Val for years. I mean, we're talking, a real genius when I was a kid, Top Gun, Tombstone, Batman Forever. I mean, you could name The Saint, you could name all his accolades. I grew up a Val Kilmer fan. So we get to Lovey's Food Market, and he's got just a basket. David Atherton, I don't even know what happened to him. I think he was either waiting back in the car or maybe on his phone outside of the health food store. And we're shopping. Me and Val are shopping, arm in arm. We're just shopping. And he's loading up his little thing, his little basket. And then all of a sudden, he saw somebody hold up a cell phone like this, and people are trying to move stuff in the health food store aisle so they could put their hand through. And he leans into me and he goes, I see them getting the googly eye. And I'm like, the googly eyes, what the fuck? And then I realized, oh, okay, paparazzi, whatever. I mean, it's not paparazzi, it's a small town. These are just locals. And they realize who he is. Even though he's fat Val Kilmer, they still can, I guess people could see who he was. And I was like, okay, so we're going to the register. We get to the register, and there's a young girl. She's got to be like 17 years old, maybe 16 years old. And this health food store is like an old school health food store. So they only had like a register that you typed in the stuff, like you held up the item, typed in $2.99, hit enter, moved on to the next thing. It wasn't like a scan thing. Like that didn't happen at that store till years later. But at this time, it was like a punch button thing. And Val looks at the woman, this young girl, and I'm standing behind him. And he leans in and he goes, "You don't work here, do you? You're pushing all those buttons, but you don't really work here." And she just looked at him like, what in the fuck is going, like, what is this guy saying to me? I don't know who he is. This guy's crazy. So I'm in panic mode a little bit, but I kind of lean over his shoulder from behind and I look at her and I go, just let it go, let it go. So she just finishes ringing out his groceries, puts his stuff in, and then we leave. We get into the car, and then we drive to a dry cleaner's. And I'm like, okay, so we got to find a dry cleaner. So I find a dry cleaner. We go there, and he's got these shirts, these Western custom-made with pearl snap buttons shirts. And apparently they're designers. So like David had said, they're worth thousands of dollars. I don't know if that's true. I didn't know nothing about fashion. And so he wanted this little hole mended in one of them and them all dry cleaned. So David and Val and I go into a dry cleaner's. And we're standing there, and this old woman comes up to the register, and she doesn't know him, and she takes the shirt, and he said, "Yeah, I want this mended, and dry clean them. Did you want heavy starch?" She's asking all the typical questions. And then she says, "What name should we put this under?" And he leans in and looks at her, and he goes, "Doc Holliday." And I was like, oh, God. Did he really just say that? Did he just say Doc Holliday? And she writes Dr. Holliday down there, Dr. Holliday. And being in the business for so long, I realized that there are people. Now, I think Val Kilmer, checks into hotels, does everything under like aliases. I know Mel Gibson, when I worked with him, he used a cartoon character from Adult Swim as his check-in at hotels and things like that. So Val Kilmer, same thing. He's Doc Holliday anytime he checks in or does anything. So I'm just like, wow, and she doesn't recognize him. She doesn't know who he is because he's fat Val Kilmer at this point. And I'm like, wow, this is surreal. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, he likes to just push people's buttons, test people for fun. He just likes to say things outrageous to provoke reactions because why not? What do you have to lose? I mean, his whole life, and being the superstar, I guess he felt he could do what he wants. But this whole eccentric, I'm Val Kilmer, I paint, I do this, I do that. I mean, all that stuff is like part of who he is, and what has shaped him to be the person that he was. So the three of us load up in the car and we drive back to his. We rented this beautiful apartment for him that overlooks the Cape Fear River. And I bring up his luggage. I'm an office PA, but I'm not like a bellhop or any of this kind of stuff. And he looks to me and he takes out a $20 bill and I'm on payroll. So like I'm getting paid, to do what I'm doing. And I get to spend like a day with Val Kilmer bouncing around all over the place doing these things. And, he takes a $20 bill and he hands it to me and he goes, "This is for the dry cleaning when you pick it up." And I'm thinking, I'm picking this up. But you have a rental car and you have an assistant, David Atherton. David should be picking this up. But I digress. I'm like, no. I said, I'll pick up your dry cleaning. Absolutely. I said, but I have petty cash on me that the production supplies me, and I'm able to purchase things that we need. I said, it's only it's less than $10, so $2.50 a shirt, whatever it was, plus the mending. I was like, I'll take care of it, and the production will pick up the tab. And we're allowed to do things like that, with talent. You got to massage these egos on these people. And he goes, well, then why don't you take the $20 bill? And I said, I'm not a bellhop. I'm like, I work for the production. I'm like, I'm not a bellhop. And I was real sarcastic about it. It was because I was offended, But I figured, like, okay, he wants to banter back and forth. Let's do it. And then he looks at me and he leans in and he goes, I don't like you. And I looked right back at him and I just went, bullshit. You like me. And he goes, yeah, I like you. And I walked out, closed the door behind me, and I got back to the production office like, oh my God, I just spent all this time bouncing around in different places with Val Kilmer, and he's like fucking eccentric and crazy and nuts, just like his reputation is. Like, this is like the guy, this is who he is. So, but then the production got a little wonky, okay? Only for Val. Everybody else was fine. Everybody else showed up to work. Everybody else knew their lines. I mean, this was an all-star cast. But Val, something was off. And, when you looked, this was a period of time when you looked at Val Kilmer's IMDb, you would see there'd be like 10 movies in production. And our movie, I think we paid him $200,000. I remember seeing in the production office, the contracts and stuff, because I would make photocopies of the contracts. And we paid him $200,000 for 5 days worth of work. Well, he only worked 4 of the 5 days because he kind of bailed on us in a weird way. But I guess he had finished all of his work. But, there was one time when he comes to set and he's like sweating like a pig, and we're like, is he on something? What's going on? He looks off. He's not right. Something's not right. And he had none of his lines memorized. And he had worked several days prior to that, so he knew his lines. But then on this particular day, he was sweating like a pig. He looked like he was on something. I don't want to be accusatory. I don't know what this guy does in his spare time recreationally, but he was not right. And so they called me. They said, Sean, we need you to run with your petty cash, go down, get some big white construction board, like the paper board, and a big fat marker, and we've got to write his lines. We've got to give him cue cards. He doesn't know his lines. The day is going on. Time is money. I mean, when you work on a feature film, you're spending about $300,000 a day on payroll and salaries for the entire crew, or more. And so, like, time is money. So I get all that stuff. I get back to set. They send that stuff to set. They do the cue cards. He can't read the cue cards. Something's off. Something's not right. He's sweating. He's just can't do his lines. We all kind of suspect something's up. So they ended up, because he had long hair in the movie, putting a radio mic in his ear and covering it up. And then Chris Christopherson would say his line. And then Val, they would get on the radio and say the line, and then Val would throw out his line, and then Chris would say his line, and then somebody would get on the radio and they would say the line, and then Val would say his line. And needless to say, on that particular day, when you watch the movie Bloodworth, if you ever see this film and you get to the scene where Chris Christopherson and Val are sitting on lawn chairs looking out over a pond, the coverage, there's not a lot of coverage of Val in the scene. It's a lot of off-camera voice work, which I don't even know if they did ADR with him later on in post-production, or they just took the lines that they had and just laid them in. But that was the bad day. And then, all of a sudden, we get a call in the production office, and, he had a first-class ticket to and from New Mexico. And it was like $3,000. But he had requested the cash equivalent and didn't want to take the flight back, said he was going to do his own thing, and he would find his way back to New Mexico. Well, all of a sudden, the rental car that the production had rented for him disappeared. We didn't know. We thought, oh, well, maybe he's just going to take a later flight that day, didn't want to do anything, you know. And so, but the car was never turned in. And so, you know, the production is just like, oh, what's going on? The car, where's the car? Where's the car? You know, they're all looking for it. And of course, you know, you want to turn these cars in as soon as the talent is done using them, because you know, this was a low budget film and every penny is crucial. So long story short, he had decided to drive to Washington, D.C. for some sort of fundraiser or some sort of political event. And I ended up seeing on Entertainment Tonight, he was on Entertainment Tonight or some sort of report that he was at this political event in DC or art show or something like that. And I'm going, that's where he ended up. And well, long story short, like they were reporting the car stolen. Nobody could get up with Val. Nobody could find out where he was. And he had just left the rental car in the parking lot at, I think it was Reagan International Airport, with keys in it, and took a flight there, just paid for and cash a flight back to New Mexico after he was done driving all the way to DC to go on his little journey to go to this event, and didn't communicate that with us, with the production. And when they finally found the car, now if you can imagine just not knowing where this car is, and then an airport the size of Reagan International, and randomly in any random parking space, there's just a car with keys in it sitting there. And nobody knew where it was, nobody could find it. And then of course somebody finally found it a week or 2 weeks later, and you know, it wasn't listed as stolen and all that kind of stuff. But it was just like really, the whole experience was like really weird. And then there was one thing that like I've always been hesitant to tell people, but there was a scene where this young kid, Reese Thompson, he was playing like the lead in this thing. And it was like a Forrest Gump type movie. And he was playing like a kid that was supposed to be on the spectrum. And this was like a big movie for him. Like he was just starting out. He had done some stuff. I want to say, I haven't looked at his IMDb, but I feel like back then I had seen that he had done some day player stuff on the OC, or was on the OC or something like that. And then this was like a big deal movie for this kid. And Val was off to the side, and he had said something really rude, like, the director, Shane, was talking to Reese, and he had said something rude like, is anything you tell that kid going to make him a better actor? And it was like crushing. Like, you can't say something like that. You know, even if you are Val Kilmer, you can't crush a person in front of, you know, 50 crew member that are all there with lights and cameras and all this. You can't call out somebody like that. And I just thought, what a dick move to do, you know? So, you know, over the years, I've just had this, you know, love-hate relationship. For years after that experience with Val, I couldn't even watch a Val Kilmer movie. And this is somebody who loved Real Genius and loved Tombstone and Batman Forever and Top Gun. And I was just such a big Val Kilmer fan. And then for years, I would see something, you know, on TV, and if he was in it, I'd skip it. I wouldn't watch it. Oh God, it's Val again. Jesus, what a dick. He was such an asshole, you know, on set. He you know, we had to get cue cards, and he was unprofessional and just weird and all that. And I really just wanted nothing to do with anything Val Kilmer. And I was really hesitant to watch his documentary when it first came out about his life. And I avoided it. Even though, like, in my gut, I'm like, I got to watch this thing. I got to see what this is, you know, what this is about. And then when I watched it, I kind of changed, you know, my tune about, like, him in general. Sure, people make mistakes in life. Sure, you know, you go to Juilliard, you're arrogant, you were a huge star with movies like Heat and all that, which is another big fan favorite of mine. And, you know, you're handed everything for years. Nobody says no to you. This industry does really, you know, fuck with people on a level that they don't live in the same world that we do. Some of these actors, some of them I've experienced are so down to earth and absolutely fantastic. And some of them, like Val was fucking on cloud nine. But I'm watching this documentary, and I see the whole section where his brother had died in a swimming pool or a jacuzzi or something like that, and at the family home, and he was so young, and I think Val was young too. I don't know if he was like 12 or 13 or something like that. But he, you know, and I thought, God, Jesus, like, you know, how do you manage that at a young age? You know, or he may have been 16 or something. I can't remember I'd have to go back and watch the documentary again. But I just remember like the light switch just kind of flipped for me, and I went, okay, you know. And I realized that, like, you know, because of the cancer that he had gone through and the damage to his vocal cords and having a trach and all this other kind of stuff, that his life, you know, he wasn't able to perform and act the way he could have acted in Hollywood. You know, nobody was hiring him. He had done one movie where he played a serial killer where he didn't speak, or somebody overdubbed his lines or something like that in post-production. I thought that was, you know, I was like, oh man, this is hard for him. And you know, my dad passed away at 63 from cancer. You know, Val's 65 from pneumonia, but let's be honest, all of it's interlinked, because if he didn't have the trach, you know, he probably wouldn't have gotten a lung infection, you know, with the vocal cords. I think they had removed, you know, part of his jaw and stuff like that. And so, you know, and a lot of that's radiation damage. You know, I have another friend that had throat cancer, and they had to mess with his jaw and stuff too. And so, like, you change your perspective as a human about Val, and the trauma that he went through as a kid, and all that shaped who he was. But at the same time, Hollywood's at fault for giving people everything and making them feel like they're untouchable, for them to treat people like shit from time to time. Now, again, this was just my one experience with Val. I'm sure there are other people that had great experiences with Val, and I don't want this video to come across as like, you know, clickbait or anything like that. But, you know, my daughter's 5 years old, and I turned 50 April 22nd. And I just thought to myself, if I don't tell some of these stories, if something ever happened to me, you start thinking about your own. I was like, maybe my daughter could go back and watch this video and go, oh, you know, he did a movie with Val Kilmer, and this is what he thought. And so when she watches the movies, you know, she can understand that, like, there was a perspective that I had from working on a film with him. But in the end, you know, I cried watching Top Gun Maverick in all of his scenes because of the documentary, because of the experience that I had with him. And some of those moments where he was, you know, really weird and screwing with people, you know, those are moments that I cherish. I don't cherish the negative stuff, but for the most part, you know, I got to hang out with Val Kilmer. I got to hang out with Val Kilmer. And although it was fleeting, it was one of many highlights in my career. My heart goes out to his family and friends, and David Atherton, if you're out there, and I know, and his kids, because I've seen the documentary, and you know, I just I'm heartbroken for them, and yeah. So rest in peace, Val. You have a hell of a story and a hell of a body of work, and you know, we're all grateful for it.